You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
What's up, nerds? And we are back! Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, your one-stop spot for all things Overwatch League. We've been, a little bit away for like a week. We had Memorial Day. That's the thing that happened, so we took the week off. But you know what? We're mid-season break. We finally got Overwatch League back here this week, so we're excited to talk about that. Of course, we got a couple of other things to kind of like distract us during the break, like, some LAN tournaments for contenders, all of that good stuff. But tonight, on episode 82, we'll be taking a look at the latest in Overwatch League news. We'll also take a look at everything that's been going down in the showdowns. We have an academy team that is decided to step into a different domain, a different region. And of course, we've got our Overwatch League Stage 3 Week 1 preview. But before we can get into the news and introduce you to my co-host, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us tonight on Twitch for our live show. And of course, to thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So joining me tonight on this return episode is my co-host Spider. And Spider, the week is finally here. It's felt like an eternity since we last spectated the Overwatch League. We got some exciting things on horizon, at least for like the Overwatch League viewer clients, I guess. We do have confirmation on what patch Stage 3 is going to be played on, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, it is not the PTR patch, so expect that aforementioned rematch between the San Francisco Shock and the Vancouver Titans. But how's the break been treating you?
It's been pretty good. I mean, we had the big panels, so that tided me over, and then we had last week off due to Memorial Day. Kind of busy that day, so and there wasn't a super lot to talk about that we didn't cover in the panel. So it was nice to take a vacation, but I'm glad to get back into it. Other than that, just enjoying the showdowns, enjoying playing Overwatch. I actually get to sit down and play it rather than having to watch it a couple nights a week, and then fitting the playtime in wherever I can. So that was pretty nice. Beyond that, messing around in the workshop, doing all the fun modes. Like the first day the workshop was out, I think I said it on the last show, but I went in and got like all the training modes and stuff, and I've just been steadily adding to that to the point where now I can't add anymore. So I have to like erase old ones. I'm like, well, I've kind of played enough Torbjorn golf. If I want it, I'll get it again. So we have the spreadsheet. You have like ELO Hell workshop site. So just been enjoying the game. I mean, it's. I think right now the game's in probably the best place it's ever been for the non-Overwatch League players. For Overwatch League players, like you said, we know what patch we're going to be on. We know, what we're going to be covering tonight. We have a whole lot of in-depth analysis for you guys that is basically going to be like, hey, here's the Shock, here's the Titans, and then here's the other 18 teams. So let's talk about them for a little bit. Not to spoil the rest of the show, but it is what it is. So I'm excited. I think that I was a little worried that this break was going to be too long, and we've talked about it in our Discord and stuff that it did feel a little longer. But I think going into basically the same patch, I think the long break was needed, because even though it is the same, the hype has built back up at least a little bit to see, oh cool, I get to watch Overwatch League again, so that's gonna be fun. Now after the first week, I'm sure that's gonna fade, and we're gonna be like, oh great, we're back to goats again. So but how about you, man? How was your extended vacation and coordinating 32 podcasts or whatever it was?
It's been pretty good actually. Earlier yesterday afternoon, I actually guested on the Omnic Weekly. So I got to apologize to Hannah for keeping her up until like 5 o'clock in the morning her time during the one panel, since I wasn't on that one.
Yep.
But it's been good. I will say, though, the break did feel really long. And, I know we're not patched in, and there's a lot of gripes about that. But, it is what it is. Maybe that means, like, Stage 4 will kind of mirror what we saw in the inaugural season, where, one team is gonna just run the same thing, but something different, 60% of the time, like Dallas Fuel did with Brigida. I don't know, but I'm excited for this week, excited to get back in, and I'm pretty excited for, some of the stuff that's been going down kind of like behind the scenes, and especially like everything going down with the Path to Pro scene, because we got a pretty big story today. That was a recent announcement from one of the Academy teams that I am really curious to see how that is going to pan out. But over the last couple of weeks, because it has been, 2 weeks since we recorded our last episode, we did have some pretty big news that dropped, and that is that the Overwatch League Commissioner, Nate Nancer, has stepped down and is actually left to pursue a new opportunity with Epic Games, specifically working on Fortnite. So he's going to be overseeing competitive esports over at Epic Games, and what's important to note about this is that Nate Nancer was basically the person that had pitched the esports league idea to our dev and savior, Papa Jeffy Cap, praise him, all the way back at Gamescom of 2015, and we basically saw how everything else panned out. Now, lately, Nancer's kind of been more of the the spokesperson. He's been more the ideas guy. So, I don't expect a lot in regards to, like, the day-to-day operations, really seeing too much of a dramatic shift in his absence. But while he's out doing whatever he's going to be doing with Fortnite, we do have the CEO of Activision Blizzard Esports League, Pete Flastelica, stepping in as Nancer's replacement. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe he's an interim. That's an interim position, so they're going to be looking at bringing in someone new to fill that commissioner role going into that 2020 season, which of course is going to be a big season due to, the geolocation and having to travel more and more. But this was kind of out of the blue. This is not something that we were expecting. But what were your thoughts behind the timing of this, say, leaving now as opposed to, kind of like in between seasons altogether?
I mean, it is a little weird for him to leave mid-season, and they definitely pulled the old PR tactic of dropping it Friday night before Memorial Day weekend, hoping that it wouldn't cause a huge ruckus. And overall, I hate to say, I think it kind of worked, because we saw like a flurry of activity the next day, and then beyond that, not many people have really talked about it too much. There's been news sites here and there that have kind of hinted on it, but you're gonna get called out for typing. You better watch it.
What?
Yep, we're picking it up.
Strange, because my mic mute was on.
But we don't want any more negative reviews.
Well, too bad.
But back to Nancer. I do think that it is sad for the league that he's leaving, but from what I've gathered from Nate and, just watching him on interviews, I never got to talk to him or meet him face to face, but he seems like the kind of guy that likes the challenge. He kind of likes, building it up, and his job pretty much for the Overwatch League is done. It's off the ground. It's up to them to, as Angry Joe likes to say, not F it up at this point. So they're up and running at this point. So I think he kind of said, all right, well, I'm going to move on. And, I'm sure there was a little bit of dough involved, and Epic's got that money to throw at him. So I'm not surprised by this. I am a little worried about the interim, just because as I dug more into Pete, good old Pete, it seems not many people are real happy under him. Based on what I'm reading and what we're seeing around the web.
The rumor reports.
The rumor reports and stuff. And they're even going back beyond the rumor reports. There is stuff dating back where like previous employees have said things about him that aren't all that kind. So I hope that he gets pushed out back to his role in just general esports quicker. But as a whole, like I said, I think Overwatch League has its footing now, and it would be pretty hard for him to do anything that would damage it. Cross your fingers. Blizzard has done things recently that we wouldn't have expected them to. So I will gladly ignore that for the moment and just hope that the league is kind of self-contained. But I am sad to see him go, just because the enthusiasm and just the amount of passion that he had for Overwatch League was so genuine. Like every time he talked about it, every time he did any interviews, every time he got up on stage at BlizzCon, it was like 100%. He was fully invested, and I think that's what Epic needs right now. It's just sad that it came at the cost of Overwatch right now.
Yeah, hopefully everything works out, unlike Mic Mute, which is apparently not properly working. So that's the thing. But moving into some Path to Pro news, it's been a busy couple of weeks for contenders because we did have both the Atlantic and the Pacific Showdown, which pit the best teams from each region against one another. So we started off with the Pacific Showdown, and lo and behold, it is time to again hail our Korean overlords, as it was the Contenders Korea champions, Element Mystic, coming out on top of the Pacific Showdown by taking down O2 Blast in the grand finals. Now, Element Mystic stood tall after a 4-2 victory over O2 Blast, which was basically like that win secured another spot for Korea at the Gauntlet, which is going to be happening later this year in October. We'll have more on that here in just a few minutes. Now, in the Pacific Showdown, we did see China's best chance coming from the one winner, who did lose to Element Mystic in the upper bracket during the second round. And then they had a little bit of a run in the lower bracket where they eliminated Order before defeating Talon Esports, eventually falling to O2 Blast, losing that one 0-3 in the lower bracket finals. Now, what does this mean for the long term for the Gauntlet, which is going to be where kind of like the best between everyone are clashing, because, some spots were determined based on how teams fared in the showdowns. Now, what this means is Korea is going to have 3 representatives in the Gauntlet. Also securing spots, you have China and the Pacific. And, for China, unfortunately, they did lose a spot due to the fact that LGE Hua had finished in 5th place, and if you finish in 5th or 6th, your region had lost a spot. So unfortunately for Australia, Order finished 6th place in the Pacific Showdown, so Australia is not going to be attending the event at all. So, it's unfortunate. They're not the only region to not be making the trip in October. But I have to say, we didn't necessarily see Doombra 100% of the time from Element Mystic. O2 Blast did try to run, goat smears against Element Mystic. And, they had some success at that. But, they always kind of had, like, that ace up their sleeves of, just bringing Sparkle onto, the Doofus and him just kind of running ham here lately. But I can't say that I'm all too surprised by the result. But, Element Mystic, they beat O2 Blast in the Contenders Korea Finals, and then they beat them twice in the Showdown.
Yeah, it was exciting to watch. I mean, Element Mystic did look a little more fallible at this point. They weren't undefeatable. They were forced off of the Doomfist occasionally. Sparkle had his moments, but it wasn't nearly as dominant as we saw in Korea Contenders. So it seems like at least O2 kind of knew at least somewhat how to keep him at bay. I mean, he still had a lot of pop-off moments, and he still, essentially ran wild here and there. But it wasn't like the Contenders, run where he was just totally, unobstructed, I guess is the best way to put it, as a Doomfist. Mm-hmm. But really what surprised me is they really stepped up their Sombra play. Like Doa Sombra was impressive. Like he, we talk a lot about Davin and, on Sombra, and, there are other Sombras out there like Snillo and Dante and all those people that you think of when you play Sombra. He kind of showed me that he might be the best Sombra in the world right now. And the hacks were right where he needed to be. The EMPs were on point every time. Like it secured multiple points for them very easily. So when this gauntlet comes around, it really doesn't matter that China lost a spot. It doesn't matter that Australia lost their only spot, because right now we're only looking at Element Mystic, and if they can keep it up. So we did get to see the Atlantic Showdown, and we will talk about that soon. But we may get a preview of what's going on in the gauntlet sooner than we might expect. So I all in all, like, the Pacific Showdown was fun to watch, but it wasn't anything surprising. Like, there weren't any major upsets. Maybe Australia bowing out so early kind of surprised me, because I had personally hoped they do better. But looking at the talent involved, it's not super surprising when you look at it. But all in all, it was fun to watch, but no big surprises.
Yeah, it was really no surprise that Chinese teams continue to struggle against Korea. That seems to be a trend that happens time and time again. But speaking of the Atlantic Showdown, we had some interesting things happen. So for starters, this is important to note, this was held basically in Angry Titan's house, because it was at the Take TV Studios, which is where they are housed. So, it was a home game for Angry Titans. Did that help them? Not really. And a lot of that was due to the fact that, Fusion University showed up. Go figure. Everyone's talking about how Instagram's how, Fusion Uni aren't looking as strong this time around. Everyone was cashing in their scrim bucks, and then Fusion Uni just mudhole stomped literally everyone. It wasn't even close. So Fusion Uni again just streaked through another major championship. They picked up wins over Angry Titans, who were the EU champions of this prior contenders season, as well as Team Envy, who had won the other NA region as well. And due to this win, Fusion University secured another representative for the North American scene at the Gauntlet event. Now, as we mentioned earlier, South America, they actually joined Australia in being another region knocked out, and that was due to the fact that Low-Key Esports came in, and they finished in 6th place. So what was once part of Brazil Gaming House has now been snuffed out even before the bigger LAN tournament, which of course is going to be the World Cup at BlizzCon this year. But, it's sad to see. Like, we expect to see maybe a little bit more out of Australia and South America, but, it's kind of been a case of when we get to these bigger regional competitions, they just haven't quite been able to measure up to some of the other regions, and a lot of that is just due to the infrastructure that is currently in place in their respective regions. So hopefully at some point that gap is going to get a little bit narrower. But looking at it, EU had also lost one of their spots after a disappointing 5th place finish by British Hurricane. And after that first series, when we saw the Hurricane going up against Team Envy in a 5-map series, which was really close, but they got dropped down to the lower bracket. ATL Academy swept the Hurricane, and with that they finish in 5th place. So the EU powerhouse, they only get one representative in the Gauntlet later this year, and there was a lot of trash talk throughout this event between NA and EU, because NA just kept dominating, which is not, honestly, I feel like we have waited long enough.
Yeah. No, that was my favorite part of this whole event was during the first few matches, it was EU is, and leading up to it, it was all EU is the GOATS champions. British Hurricane, Angry Titans would stomp every other GOATS team and contenders and blah, 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 blah. And then as the weekend went on, like, the tweets just steadily declined. Sideshow stopped tweeting completely. It was just hilarious to watch it. And then at the end, the end was an NA final between Fusion and Envy. And, we already said Fusion basically ram shot through everybody. But it was exciting to see NA do this well. And if it was just Fusion University, I could have just chalked that up to their, Fusion University. I mean, look at them. They haven't lost an event that they've participated in, like a major tournament, in about a year now. The last time they didn't place first was like June 6th or June 11th of last year, based on what I looked up. So that's pretty impressive for an organization. And even then, prior to that, they placed first in everything else. So they are dominant. But then Envy came out, and Envy looked really good as well. Which they're also a contenders champion. But they never quite looked as dominant as Fusion University has. Whether you looked at last contenders or historically, they've kind of been up and down. Mm-hmm. But they did really well too. And it's still nowhere near Fusion University level. It's kind of like the Overwatch League microcosm in contenders. Like you have like Fusion University and everyone else, not counting Korea, which we will find out how that plays out soon enough. But it's very similar to like the Shock and the Titans in Overwatch League. So it's funny that they're kind of in the same meta, and the dominance like factor is the same between tier 1 and tier 2. There's like a team that is clearly better at it, or in the case of Overwatch League, 2 teams, because obviously more talent, but it's just fun to watch that way. So I was excited, and I did so well. I was really excited because I am still an Envious fan, like obviously Dallas Fuel fan, so I still support Envious. But tier 2, I kind of just root for more individual players. I like to see Sugar Free do well. Like we all talk about Sugar Free, and as some people met him, they met like Sugar Free's dad, and they called him Sugar Dad and stuff like that. So Trill, yeah, I'm excited to see Trill move up to Dallas Fuel and see how that shakes out. But as a whole, like I had a lot more fun watching the Atlantic Showdown, just purely because of the trash talk. And then the trash talk steadily declined. So by the final, I was like, cool, NA final. Suck it, EU.
Yeah, and it's important to note, too, that in Team Envy's case, they did have someone stepping in to serve as, a new main tank, since Trill did get promoted here recently.
Right.
So that was another thing that really caught me off guard, just how well Envy ended up doing, even despite maybe a little bit less practice compared to some of the rest of the field. But no surprise, Fusion Uni still looking strong, and lo and behold, the team that deals a lot with like 200 pain with the Korean players when they play in NA, they just come out and dominate on a LAN environment. Who would have thought? I'd love to see it. But of course, all of this is leading up to the Contenders Gauntlet, which will be happening from October 9th through October 13th. And I cannot wait for this event in particular. It's going to be held at the Giga Arena in Seoul, South Korea. And, if you've been following competitive Overwatch, you probably know that this is home to OGN competition, where Apex competitions were held for 4 seasons back in 2016 and 2017. Of course, the partnership that Overwatch had with OGN had ended, and that's when they kind of, left that space, and that was when Apex was basically replaced by Contenders Korea, and, of course, they moved venues at that point, but it's really, like, a homecoming for competitive Overwatch in Korea, which I'm excited to see, and this is going to feature 10 Contenders teams from across the globe. Now, as I mentioned earlier, region slots for the Gauntlet were determined based on how teams fared in the Atlantic and Pacific Showdown, and I do have the breakdown so everyone will know, what regions are going to have in regards to slots. So we have Korea, who secured 3 slots for this event. We have 1 team that will be representing China. We have 1 team representing the Pacific. We have 4 from North America, 2 from the East, and 2 from the West. And of course, that is due to the fact that NA was broken up into 2 regions this year. And we have 1 slot for Europe. Now, we don't know what teams are going to be playing here, because I believe that's just based on how teams do throughout the entirety of the 2019 season.
I think so, yeah.
So there is a bit of a question mark in regards to one team in particular, which we'll get into in a little bit because of a shift, so to speak. But looking at this pack, are you surprised at how the breakdown actually ended up being? How it's primarily NA and Korea, as opposed to having a little bit more representation in the EU?
I am surprised that there is a lack of EU teams, especially given the meta. Because we did just kind of make fun of them, but they were good GOATS teams. But apparently they just weren't good enough compared to what is currently out there. And EU teams have traditionally been the least likely to innovate, whereas we're seeing like the 222 and stuff like that out of Korea. The other than the clockwork comp, the bunker comp, it's basically been GOATs in EU. So I am surprised, but I'm not surprised at the same time. It's a weird place to be in. I am surprised that we have so many slots for NA. Like I expected at least South America to get a spot. Like I said, Australia was kind of my long shot. Like I had hoped they would get in, but I'm not super surprised they didn't. But South America has always been that region that I feel has a lot of talent, but like you said, due to infrastructure and stuff, they kind of struggle when they're put on the bigger stage. So, but I still thought that they would do well enough to at least secure one spot. And I kind of hoped they would, just because I think that would push them to increase the infrastructure. But now that they haven't, we're going to look at the main regions of NA and Korea basically still being the main regions. Like there's not going to be a whole lot of talent filtering up out of these smaller regions now, which is kind of sad. But as a whole, I'm not super surprised this is the way it played out, based on the dominance of teams in certain leagues, like you said, Korea. Element Mystic's been pretty dominant. Obviously, Fusion University has been highly dominant in the NA scene even before they split it up. So I'm not super surprised. I am excited to see OGN's production again, just because of the fact that their production is going to start putting all these other tier 2 productions to shame. Just go back and watch like old Apex production and you'll know what I'm talking about if you missed it. And I am hoping that Blizzard hypes this event up as we get closer to it. They did finally start hyping up tier 2 last weekend, where they put it on like the Overwatch League page, and we got some decent numbers. So I hope that continues and they generate, I'd like to see like 40,000, 50,000 player, people watching it, because that's what we need for tier 2, because tier 2 is struggling right now. Teams are dropping out. Academy teams are dropping out. We're going to talk about one very shortly. So, they need to start doing something for tier 2. And Trenchfoot in chat asks, but will they have DJ Khaled? Not if they know what is good for them. Not if they want tier 2 to succeed. So it's possible they might. I don't know.
Well, but here's the thing. Like, if Overwatch League doesn't promote it, then no one will be there to see it.
And we could call that a win. So I am excited for this. Like, as soon as they announced OGN as like the host, I was already excited about it, but my expectations like went up by like 50%.
Absolutely, and it is a homecoming, and we will have something else that's a little bit of in Apex vibes as well coming up here. But speaking of teams that have been disbanded, we see another Academy team biting the dust. So another week, another Academy team has exited the scene, and this time it is the Guangzhou Academy team who have announced that the team has disbanded. Now, Guangzhou is shifting their focus onto the Charge, which Honestly, probably a good thing. They definitely had their fair share of struggles in the first half of the season, and of course, they are shifting their focus on plans of localization in 2020. So, just like a quick timeline, basically, of everything that's gone down. So, like, we saw the Shock and the Mayhem disband their affiliate teams following the first season of Contenders 2019. The Paris Eternal got relegated to Open Division, and they disbanded. Now Guangzhou Academy has entered that fold. And, for Guangzhou, they only managed to secure one win in Contenders China this season. They finished 5th place in their group. And, with that finish, that would have sent them down to Contenders Trials. And, not the first time we've seen a relegated team just decide to go out and call it quits. Now, what does this mean for that spot that their team owns? Well, no team is going to be replacing their slot held by GZA, so there's only going to be 7 teams competing in Trials China. And I'm kind of like looking at the roster, they do have 3 players that were on 2-way contracts with their main roster, so that includes Nero, who, if I'm not mistaken, I think he just turned 18 this past week. I'll have to double check on that. But they also have Rise and Only Wish. So out of this roster, the people that are now considered free agents, you have Mui, MG, Tizzy, who's been kind of getting thrown around quite a bit lately, thanks to the whole XL2 debacle, as well as Century. But it just seems like time and time again, Spider, like these affiliate teams are just deciding, you know what? We're not quite cutting it, let's just retool, rebrand, whatever, like, going back to the drawing boards. Are you at all surprised by just the amount of Academy teams that are just deciding to call it a day at this point?
Not really. I'd hate to say that, but, it's just, queue up another one that bites the dust on, whatever your music app of choice is. Because that seems to be the going trend for Academy teams. They're such a money pit. For some reason, in my show notes, it changed it to monkey pit, which makes it even funnier. But they are such like a money pit. They cost so much money, and the return, unless they're winning, is very little. Most teams don't want to invest in it, and I wouldn't be surprised if Blizzard is kind of wishing they made Academy teams mandatory at this point, just because I would hope Nate would have had the foresight to realize how important Tier 2 is to the longevity of Overwatch, but the in 9 out of 10 cases, the owning of a Academy team really isn't worth it. Like, sometimes you will see teams pull off like a crazy trade deal, like Florida did with their Academy players, or you'll get like the rare fusions out of an Academy team. But like I said, 9 times out of 10, it's really not worth it right now to own and operate an Academy team, and that's sad, because like I said, I want Tier 2 to succeed. I think Tier 2 is very important, but in terms of like Guangzhou specifically, I'm not surprised that they stuttered their Academy team, just because if you look, the main team is having problems, and they have to focus on localization, and they're one of the few Chinese teams that have non-Chinese players that aren't Korean. I had to find a good way to say that. So they are one of the few like mixed Chinese teams. So they have a lot to deal with already. So I think taking their Academy team out makes sense from a business standpoint. From a Tier 2 standpoint, it's sad. Even though they were relegated and all that, it is sad to see an Academy team drop. And hopefully they'll find, after localization and all that, they will find their way back into the fold. But like I said, I'm not super surprised. Like I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple more fold by the end of the year. So they may stick it out for one more Contenders season, wait till the gauntlet gets thrown down, and then we may see a couple more Academy teams exit.
Okay, so here's my take. Fusion University, they're gonna come in, they're gonna win the gauntlet, and literally every other academy team at that point is going to fold, because at that point they would have beaten every team out there.
It's possible.
You never know.
I mean,
Who knows? But anyways, so while we are saying goodbye to an academy team, we also have to say goodbye to a couple of the remaining Florida Mayhem players that aren't Korean players. So the shift to that all-Korean focus has been completed, as they have said goodbye to Apply, to Vic, and SNT. So Florida Mayhem, they are going out, they are trying to find a new bus driver. They also need, someone to acquire kebabs. So I don't know, like, where on the totem pole that priority is going to be. But, we have SNT, who had kind of transitioned to, like, a coaching role with the Mayhem. It was also listed as, like, an alternate, like a substitution tank, but he never actually saw any playtime this season for the Mayhem. And, to Vic, looking back, that was the last remaining player from that former Misfits roster who, were the core roster of the Mayhem back in the inaugural season. And Apply was basically, on a two-way contract for the second season. He was one of the long-standing members of Mayhem Academy who, as we mentioned prior, did decide to kind of, like, retool their roster and have since stepped out of Contenders North America for the remainder of the year. Which probably means that they are going to go a Korean route, just because, like, it doesn't make sense to have, like, an NA team if, like, you're not going to be able to move any of those pieces to your main roster. That's not going to work out. So we have yet to see the gamble or the retooling of the Florida Mayhem pay off, and that's definitely going to be one of the storylines that we're going to be keeping a close eye on in this upcoming stage. So, kind of looking at this, knowing that the landscape is going to be a little bit different, they have a new main tank. How are you feeling about the Florida Mayhem going into this next stage?
Oh boy, you're jumping ahead. I have high hopes for them. So I think Florida. Let me see, because I had actually written something specifically for them in our preview of Stage 3. So I think, an all-Korean Florida in Stage 3 will probably do okay. They do play some hard teams, but they also play the other members of the Traffic Light Trio. And so they don't play Washington, but they do play the team right above Washington. So they could pick up some wins. I am optimistic that they will pick up some wins. But I mean, this is just the final nail in the coffin of the whole. We're not going to run an all Korean roster, but we're totally going to run an all Korean roster. Coffin. So we knew this was coming. Nobody should really be surprised about any of this. Maybe SNT, but he hasn't played really. So what does it matter? Danta in chat was talking about Apply, and that's kind of where I wanted to go. Of these three, Apply will be picked up by somebody, whether it's a tier 2 team, whether it's an Overwatch League team, who knows? Probably tier 2 at this point. But he'll get picked up. Like he's such a good player. He was one of the standout players on their team that I don't see any reason that he wouldn't play. I am worried about Tavik. I am curious to see what route he will go, because he was like the OG of OGs. Like when we were in beta, when we were in early game launch, like he was heralded as one of the best players ever. He could play any character and be dangerous on it, and that fell off like all the other OGs have. And as happens in esports and all sports. So I'm curious to see what route he will go. Like I honestly don't think he will try for another team, or I would be very surprised if he does. Like I honestly see him either transitioning to a different game or going into a coaching role at this point. That would be the most logical choice. I'm sad because I love Tavik. Like I loved watching Tavik. Even currently, I love watching Tavik. Like I still tune into his stream whenever I can catch it and stuff like that, because he is a cool guy. He is still very talented. It's just, the sun sets and the old OGs are old OGs. The OGs are put out to pasture, the coaching pasture, and unfortunately, it seems like Tavik is the next one in that line. All in all, like these three being released, not surprising. I'm hopeful that Florida will do better. I don't expect a whole lot out of them based on they're basically a new team playing together when other teams have been playing goats for months, if not over a year.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was on the panel, we had half the Florida Mayhem fan base on the panel I was on, and you had the other half on your panel. And they liked to talk a big game like, this is our turnaround. Well, you're basically statistically eliminated from the playoffs at this point. Like you might have a chance, but I think this will be their start of their at least somewhat upward trend. How steep that is, we'll see. But they're at least making moves. I'll give them credit for that.
Well, I mean, yes, they have made some changes. If you've been following the rumor mill, they might even have a couple of more announcements on the way. These releases could basically bring in us to that transition. But there's a lot of stuff going down in regards to Korea as a whole, and one of the bigger news that kind of surfaced after the Atlantic Showdown is that you have Fusion University, who have really just absolutely dominated NA as a whole in contenders. They have decided to leave the NA circuit to join contenders trials in Korea. Now, this marks the first region shift we've seen by an academy team. And, in North America, just looking back, Fusion Uni won the championship 4 seasons in a row. They won the Atlantic Showdown, so they won 5 major championships in under 2 years. And, during that stint, they had that 30-game win streak, which is probably going to be untouched in contenders. Which eventually was snapped by an academy team that isn't even active anymore. That being Mayhem Academy, who I think it's safe to say, we can definitely say Mayhem Academy looked stronger than their Overwatch League counterpart at this point. But, we do know that we have the region lock system in play. And for Fusion University, 4 of their 6 players are from Korea. And I know there's, a lot of, disgruntled EU fans bringing up, can you even call this an NA team when they have, London Spitfire, who are kind of all Korean? So besides the point. But anyways, due to the region lock, during the first season of Contenders this season, they had a grandfathered pass. So rather than making, any sort of drastic roster changes to continue to compete in a region that you've already proven to be the best team of, Fusion Uni are keeping the roster intact as much as possible and are making the shift to Korea. Now, it's important to note Trials begins this week. I want to say it starts on Wednesday. And if Fusion University are going to make it to Contenders Korea, they need to finish in the top 2. Now, kind of looking at the fields, Geekstar and Metagaming, who actually partnered with X6 Gaming for this season. Those are probably going to be the 2, biggest competitors out of the lot. But, this is something that, I saw this and I was like, this is really bringing back, Apex vibes when, we had Envious going over and being, the sole, West team to go compete here. So I'm really excited to see how Fusion University are going to stack up even at the Trials level, because you do still have some notable teams in there, but with the inevitable win, because Alarm is just going to continue to pop off left and right. We always talk about how, some teams are basically only wanting to stay together when they're trying to keep people within the organization, and when you kind of, look at all the academy teams, Fusion University has a lot of pieces that you can see getting incorporated into their main roster. Now, it is worth noting that Elk is going to return to compete with Fusion University. Of course, he'll still be on a two-way contract, but, this is something that we haven't quite seen yet, and there is a lot of excitement built around this team. They have a lot of mystique around them. So how do you feel like they're going to fare when we stack them up against some of the Korean teams out there?
I think they'll do okay in trials. Like I honestly expect them to finish top 2. I don't think that's totally unexpected. I'm curious to see how well they do in actual contenders if they can make it in there, because I think it will be a bit of a rude awakening for them. Like NA has definitely not pushed them to any degree. So I think when they get over to Korea and they start playing these teams, we'll get a good look of how the regions really fare against each other. They may do really well. Like they may give Element Mystic a run. Like who knows? This is the question we want answered. We don't even have to wait to the gauntlet to do it, because Fusion's, like you said, they said, all right, well, this isn't really giving us a challenge, and most of our roster's Korean anyway, so we're gonna hop on a plane and go over there. And they literally left yesterday so they could be there to play. I think it starts on the 4th, so it might even be tomorrow night for us. So it's time zones are hard, but I am curious to see how they do. You had kind of, I did like your analogy of, it was like when Envious went over to Korea for Apex. I think that's kind of funny, because it'd be more like Lunatic High having one American member and saying we're gonna play in NA now because we're an NA team.
It's basically Elk versus Korea.
Basically, so Snillo, like they still got Snillo as far as I know. Snillo is still going to be on the roster. So it's one NA, one EU, and a bunch of Koreans versus Korea. So that, and for a lot of people that are worried about Karkar, I think Karkar will be fine. The current theory on why they pulled Elk back in is Karkar is not 18, and Korea has some stricter import laws in terms of minors. So I think Fusion, to pull this off, said we're going to take the easiest route possible and not have to worry about that. So they pulled Elk back in. And I think it is sad to see Karkar go, because he was one of the dominant factors for the team in their recent season. But, Elk was part of that team long before that, and he was just as dominant. So I don't think fans of the team, owners of jerseys that say F you, don't have to worry too much. Circling back around, I think they will be fine in trials. I don't think there are many teams, at least that I've seen or heard about, that I think will stop them. I think they will have a harder time for sure, but I think we'll see them in contenders. Now, if they do bomb out and don't make it, I'm really curious to see what happens, because I'm kind of with Adenar on this. Like, if they don't make it to Contenders Korea, I think they should be like, well, guess we're not playing Contenders this season, and that should affect them, because you make egotistical moves and they backfire, you should be punished for them. That's how I feel. So I'd hate to say this. I am loath to say this, because he is probably going to clip it, but I agree with Adenar.
I mean, some things you should just never say. Don't get too far ahead of yourself there, Ed.
If you take away anything from any of my analysis, I am at least 100% honest, even to self-detriment.
You've gone and done it now. We need to cue the clip of, oh shit, here we go again. Yeah, there we go. Alright, but anyways, so obviously, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in Path to Pro, but we're here to talk about the Overwatch League. We have Stage 3 kicking off this week, and with that, of course, we have some storylines that we need to follow. So as I mentioned earlier, we are not going to be on patch 1.37, which is the current patch on the PTR, so we don't get the godlike McCree, we don't get the quality of life change with Orisa, where she can place her shield and then also reload and then not have to worry about just doing one and not the other, even though they're on different hands. All of that stuff. So likely not going to see a huge increase on McCree play or a huge rise of bunker compositions. Chances are we're still going to be seeing a lot of 3-3, so kind of like looking at the landscape, Spider. You know, we've kind of talked about how, like, it seems like we're just destined for another match between the Titans and the Shock at the end of the stage, but there's a lot of questions about kind of like these middle-of-the-pack teams that could potentially break out to potentially challenge, but, you know, kind of like looking at the history, we haven't really seen that happen, so, you know, I feel like still the likeliest option, of course, is going to be the New York Excelsior, and whether or not they'll be able to get the follow-through, I feel like is going to be the biggest X factor for that team, because Mono really had a hell of a Stage 2 playoff streak there. You know, he definitely looked like he was the glue keeping that team together. Just, they could not capitalize off of the Earthshatters that were coming down. But, you know, NYXL remains one of the more dominant teams outside of the top two. But we have seen, you know, some good things at times from the Spitfire. You could say the same thing about the Hancho Spark, who have really started to gain a lot of momentum here as of late. You have the Gladiators, who have looked pretty good at times, and then, you know, you have the Fuel, who are kind of like, I don't know how to describe the Fuel. They're either on or they're off, and you don't know which one it's going to be. You have the Dynasty, who have, you know, secured, you know, some pieces lately that we haven't seen kind of added to the puzzle yet. So there's still the question of, are we ever going to see Highly or Illicit? Will Fleta ever return? Where's Fisher? All of that stuff. So, out of the lot, who do you feel like, whether it's just based off of, you know, recent shifts in the rosters, or maybe just looking at strength of schedules, who do you feel like is going to be the team to maybe kind of break out amongst the pack, knowing that we do have, like, these 10 to 14 teams that are all within a couple of games of one another?
Before I get to that, I do want to touch on the Titans, the Juggernauts, just because I want to get them out of the way so we can talk about the other 18 teams, as I alluded to earlier. I want to just make it known that San Francisco has a pretty easy Stage 3, so we could possibly see another golden stage, if not at least a perfect stage, because they only play one team with a current winning record. They play a few 7-7 teams, but the only team they play with a winning record is London, which is, you know, they have their good days and their bad days. Mm-hmm. So with them out of the way, Titans are still Titans. Titans have similar schedule, but basically the same. They do play Gladiators twice, so that makes me worry a little bit for Gladiators. But, you know, looking at the other 18 teams, you know, I did want to talk about Florida, which we already did. You know, you had kind of mentioned that we're really, right now, if you look at the standings, we're looking at 10 teams that are fighting for a position in the playoffs, not the play-in tournament. We're really looking at 10 teams that have a solid shot to take Stage 3. If they can put out a good record, can set them up for a possible, basically, into the playoffs. Because if you're not really up to date on how they're doing the playoffs at the end of the season, the top few teams just get into the you know, year-end playoffs. The next group of teams are in a sudden death tournament for the playoffs, which two teams come out of that and get to go into the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So there's like a mini playoffs to the full playoffs type of thing. So teams will absolutely be looking to try to get by that sudden death tournament, because that's where things get screwy. If you've ever watched the NFL, playoff time is when things get screwy. That is when teams that went 9-7 go on to win the Super Bowl, you know, type of thing. So anything can happen in that sudden death playoff. So any team that is smart will try to avoid that at all possible. So we're like I said, we're honestly looking at 10 teams. To narrow that down, you actually mentioned the team I have my eye on, and that is the Spark. The Spark have looked good recently. You know, they've kind of settled on Gooshway, the Goosh, as their main tank, and they've brought Crystal into the fold, which he's looked phenomenal. And they play Vancouver once this stage, and then it's a relatively easy stage. Like they basically play teams with even or worse records. So they have a good chance to take stage 3. They already have a winning record, and propel them to that top. You know, I think it's 6.
Mm-hmm.
To bypass that sudden death tournament. Now, obviously, we still have stage 4, and things could get a little more dicey in stage 4. But doing well in stage 3, especially when you already have a winning record, will make stage 4 much less stressful, and it will help you in the long run, as wins do. They tend to help you. They tend to help, you know, not only, you know, your win loss record, but your morale. Ask any Dallas Fuel fan, and you'll know 90% of our problem last season was we were a terrible team with bad morale. So the of course, you know, I am watching the Dallas Fuel. I had to wear my hat tonight, because I wanted to wear my jersey, but the kids got it dirty the other day, and I haven't washed it yet. So I decided on my hat. So I am looking at the Dallas Fuel because they have kind of a not a super tough stage, but definitely not an easy stage. And like you said, they are basically all or nothing. It is very akin to a flame. It's either on or it's not. And not the Outlaws flame. He's just crazy. So I am gonna be watching Dallas, but I realistically, like I said, I will be totally honest. I expect Dallas to have probably a 500 stage at this point. Like if they go above 500, I will absolutely 100% be pleased. But I am not realistically expecting it with who they have to play. Like we have to play the Titans again. You know, we play the you know, it's a tough stage for Fuel. So I will be 100% honest. You know, I worry about the other Houston team. You know, we meme on the other Texas team, I should say, which is Houston, because they have a tough beginning of stage 3. Like they play NYXL, Vancouver, San Francisco. Their loss streak is probably going to continue, unless they can really surprise me. So yeah, they will continue to do poorly. Their second half of stage 3 does get better, so there is a possibility we could not see them go 0-7 again, but it's not looking good for Houston fans. So I'd hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it is. If you're a Houston fan, you should be used to it by now. You just gotta buckle up. So, finally, you know, I did pick out a couple of players, and this is based on no amount of, you know, analysis. This is just pure hope. But I hope we get to see more Blase and Eileen playing Doomfist.
Mm-hmm.
With the rise of Contenders Korea, I want to see more Doomfist out of these players because they have teams around them that can absolutely play the same style we see in Contenders Korea. Look at Boston. Look at Boston's roster and tell me that is not a Sombra Doomfist team right now. Like that can run Zarya, Rhine, Sombra, Doomfist. Like that is a pure 2-2-2 team if I've ever seen one. So I hope we get to see more Doomfist. Beyond that, you know, there's all the normal players that you can watch. You know, obviously we're gonna see who Bumper plays next on DPS. We're gonna see, you know, how many records Sinatra can break in terms of damage and stuff like that. So it's an interesting stage 3. There aren't a whole lot of like heavyweight matches. Like we don't have Shock versus Vancouver outside of the finals. You know, NYXL's kind of got a middling schedule. So I think this is the perfect stage to really look at these middling teams and you know, suss out who we could see getting into the playoffs. So it's going to be a fun stage. Like I don't want to downplay it, but Houston, you got a rough stage, man. Washington, you got a rough stage. Florida, you got an okay stage, so you might do a chance. So these lower teams could finally start picking up a few wins.
Yeah, so obviously, for me, one of the things I'm going to be keeping an eye on is that, quest for perfection with the Titans, who are currently riding, that 14-game win streak with the group stages. They also have the best map differential out of the league at plus 40. And looking at stage 3, you mentioned that they face the Gladiators twice, so that could definitely play a huge role in if the Gladiators actually make the playoff cutoff point for stage 3. But we opened up the season against Atlanta Reign. We also faced the Hangzhou Spark, Dallas Fuel, Chengdu Hunters, and the LA Valiant. So, you have basically like 2 real challengers in the Gladiators and the Spark. The Fuel is... I don't feel a lot of confidence whenever the Fuel go up against the Titan, just based off of how really any matches played out here as of late. And who really knows with the Reign? Maybe the Reign just have NYXL's number, but not any of the other, quote, Titans of the league, So I'm really curious about that. But for me, like, if I'm just talking about, like, recent additions that I'm really intrigued by, who I'm hoping the best for, I want to look at Toronto Defiant and their recent Academy tank line promotions of Gods and Sharik. There's a lot of questions about, is this tank line just going to be brought up and started full time for the Toronto Defiant? Are they just going to bring in Sharik and maybe have God switch over to the Brigida role and having I'm37 kind of fallen out of the limelight? There's a lot of question marks right now about the Toronto Defiant, who are one of those like mid-table teams that are in that 10 team kind of like hodgepodge, like cluster F, like there's so many teams that are just 7-7 right now, or are one game above that or one game below that. And if you're the Defiant, I feel like that main tank position has been one of their weaker points, and of course kind of like the fluctuation with the Zaryas hasn't necessarily been the best. So I'm hoping that it is going to be the case that they just move both of them up. And, if they switch Gods to Brigida, I don't think that's necessarily going to be, like, a bad move. Obviously, we do see a lot of, like, aggressive main tank styles paired with Brigida play. And, the Bumper-Hoxel duo is probably the key thing to look at, because Bumper feeds a lot, and Hoxel plays very aggressive at times. You could say the same thing for, what the Shock do, and maybe, we could see the Defiant try to kind of, like, mirror the approach that they take with those 2 particular roles. But I'll just be happy to see Gods playing in the Overwatch League when all is said and done. But Defiant have just kind of been a team that, they have some pretty high moments, and then, with all the kind of like swaps that we've seen with them in stage 2, they kind of got lost in the shuffle. So I'm hoping that this transition is going to bring them back out to maybe not necessarily the forefront. They're going to be back in the discussion at least. So I'm hoping the best for them, as I am for the Guangzhou Charge, who they definitely hit a rough patch in stage 2. Things have not looked very promising for the Charge, and maybe they can build off of this for stage 3? Maybe, but I'm looking at their opponents right now, and, there's a couple of teams that you'd probably favor the Charge. They do face the Justice. They face the Valiant, who are going to be an interesting team to watch as well, just due to, the whole Mayhem trade. But you have the Hunters, Defiant, and the Dragons, who were kind of in that clump as well. So maybe the Charge have something to build off of, but, like, we've seen so many moments where the Charge haven't quite lived up to kind of, like, the skill ceiling of that team. And I don't know where exactly this team is going to sit when all is said and done. Yes, they have an easier strength of schedule as opposed to what they have had in stage 1 and stage 2. I don't know if it's going to pay off yet.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to say, like, if we haven't talked about your team a lot, it's because there are so many teams to talk about right now in terms of this like middle cluster F, as you put it. So I think teams that are on the lower end, like Guangzhou, Chengdu, even though Chengdu's still kind of in the middle, I think they could turn it around and make it to that sudden death. I think Guangzhou kind of had an easy stage one, so I think expectations were set a little high. I think obviously Toronto has talent. I think they're kind of suffering from the loss of Stellar, and then they had to put in new pieces, and then they haven't quite found their footing there. So I think Toronto's kind of struggling with an identity crisis as we see teams go through. I think Atlanta's kind of going through the same thing, except when they play NYXL, and then they know exactly who they are. They are the team that beats NYXL. So I think a lot of these lower teams, and I hate to say that because like all the teams are so close. Like it takes 3 good weeks, and we're talking about like mid-table teams. You look at like Fusion, or we have hardly talked about the Fusion other than to make fun of them or make a joke here or there, but they are still in the top 6 of the league right now. So it's such a crazy league that other than the top and the very Waterloo bottom, there is such like a level of competition, and that part's really exciting to me. I wish there was, I wish it was all together, but you're gonna have the bad teams, you're gonna have the really good teams. So I will take it as it is. I do expect more out of Guangzhou this stage. I am curious to see how Toronto works in its new pieces, but there are other teams that I am even more curious about. Like I am still wanting to see how the Valiant continue, especially with their recent acquisitions. Like they're a team that I'm gonna have my eye on. It's like I said, it's gonna be exciting stage 3.
Yeah, and Fusion is a really interesting case too, because they're constantly kind of like in that top 5 discussion, but then there's some weeks where like we see them run 3-3 against other teams, and then they look like a 14th through 18th ranked team. And it's just like the most polarizing team, to me at least, within the Overwatch League in regards to what team is going to show up more so than some of the other teams that we have aforementioned. But going ahead and taking a look at Stage 3, week number 1, we do have some pretty interesting matches. So, some of them that I'm curious to find out is, we do have the Valiant going up against the Shanghai Dragons to close out Thursday night. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks about, the Valiant kind of shifting gears in regards to their roster approach. We got Fact Fiction coming in to serve as their new main tank. Of course, that was part of their deal with the Florida Mayhem. And, Shanghai have... probably the biggest storyline with Shanghai is the fact that, this is a team that hasn't been running a lot of Lucio or Diva, which is a unique approach that really none of the other teams are really focusing on. But, Shanghai, for all intents and purposes, they have looked fairly good for a mid-table team so far this season. And I feel like the Valiant, while I feel like this season as a whole, there have been a lot of growing pains. This is the perfect stage to try to right that ship. And I feel like the Valiant, out of like these bottom teams, so to speak, are going to be the team that's going to be able to make up the most ground for the second half of the season. But, outside of that, looking at the week's worth of games, are there any real standouts that you're looking forward to for this opening week of Stage 3?
Well, I've already talked about them a lot, and I just mentioned the team they're playing, so I'm going to go with Hangzhou versus Philly. Like I said, we haven't talked a whole lot about Philly, and we've talked a lot about Hangzhou, so I think this is the perfect match to kind of start Stage 3 on, because this is going to answer us, maybe not all of our questions, but it's definitely going to give us a good insight on how these teams are going to go into Stage 3. So will Hangzhou continue its upward rise? and will Philly continue its downward rise, or will Philly, in true Philadelphia fashion, turn things around and show us that maybe their trash goats or whatever you want to label them isn't so bad anymore. So I think this is the perfect match to kick off stage 3, just because both teams are 8-6. Both teams are definitely on the cusp of that getting out of the sudden death playoff tournament at the moment. And I think this is a good match, because looking at the schedule for week 1 stage 3, there isn't a whole lot of like super heavyweight matches. I mean, you could say Toronto versus Paris might give us a good look at how those two teams, like, is Paris still on their downward trend? But I mean, honestly, not a whole lot of super exciting things going on the first week. So looking at these mid-table teams, I think Hangzhou and Philadelphia is the perfect match to kind of get in and say, all right, well, we know who's at the top. Who is in that 5th position? Who is in that 6th position? So I am excited to see how that does. And, Philly's always a fun team to watch because you never quite know what they're going to do. They're kind of like the better Dallas Fuel. Like they have a little more ups than downs, even though Dallas currently has a better record than them. But they historically have had more ups than downs. So I think this will be a fun match. Another, looking at the schedule, another match I'm actually kind of curious to see how it will play out will be Boston versus London, just because Boston has been stepping things up and London has looked better going into the break, but still having some problems. So I expect that one to be pretty good too. And again, might see some Doomfist there, maybe, if we're lucky, but I doubt it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna hold my breath for that. London as a whole this week have, 2 matches that are not gonna be easy. So yes, they do open up the stage against Boston, but then they also close out the week on Sunday with the early game against New York Excelsior. So if you're NYXL, they face the Outlaws to kick off stage 3. And then we have a Korean showdown between New York and London. And, if the past is any indication, New York should look pretty strong after this. But outside of that, we do have the Gladiators going up against the Dallas Fuel on Friday to close out the night. That one should be a pretty good series. And, if you're the Gladiators, you are facing 2 teams that do have some good records. They face Dallas, and then of course they have one of their matches against the Vancouver Titans. So this is going to be a situation where you're probably not going to go 2-0. You just don't want to go 0-2 to start the stage, because that's really going to just kind of like set the course for the rest of the stage if you are the Gladiators. But we have the Charge going up against the Chengdu Hunters on Thursday night. That should be another interesting one. Just seeing really the Chinese teams play one another, there's kind of like a lot at stake if it's just like national pride, if they're just trying to prove who has a better Chinese meta, so to speak, because they do both kind of like bring their own thing. Obviously, the Charge have been looking pretty good, especially on the flex support role, and Hunters continue to throw different looks at people. So I'm curious to see how that one is going to shake out, but. Of course, for me, I just want to see, like, if the soulmates are going to continue to see what we've been seeing, which is going to be more of the same, if we're going to keep with our quote, B team, not that I'm going to use that terminology anymore, or if we're going to get to see, maybe some of our other pieces. Because, there's been, like, some scrim leaks, of course, like with screenshots and stuff. But I feel like the image in particular that showed the Dynasty roster was their new B team. Not necessarily their starting roster, but who knows? I don't want to read too much into it. I just want to see what Seoul Dynasty throw out on stage. And then we could just go from there. But for now, I am not expecting to see any changes in regards to their starting lineup.
No, I would fully expect Seoul to stick with Marville. And I think he is the right choice for them. Who's better than Fisher? Marvell right now for the team. That's what it looks like for them, and they've been looking better. I can't fault them for not running Fisher. Like you don't. They are avoiding the key mistake of you don't play a star player if he's not the right fit for you in most circumstances. There are exceptions, like you have superstar players, and I think Fisher is a talented player, but Overwatch right now is such a team-oriented game that if they are not working, you have to find a piece that fits. So I am excited to see what Soul will do in stage 3, but the case on Fisher is still open, so we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I'm trying to see like what else outside of that is really piquing my interest. Both of Paris's matches, they draw Defiant and Uprising. So again, mid-table teams. This is like a week like this is a perfect test for Paris. Like, this is a great opportunity for them to kind of dig themselves out of that trench. But if they split, nothing changes, and if they go 0-2, well, honestly, nothing really changes there. So if they find a way to win out, maybe that'll be enough to put them like one run above the ladder, as opposed to where some of these other 7th through 12th play-in tournament teams are going to end up being at the end of the stage. Or, well, at least for stage 4 at that point, because that's when the play-in tournament is going to happen, and not, the actual stage playoffs, because there is no stage playoffs in stage 4. But at the end of the day, we've seen a lot of teams either, maybe trying some new things in regards to, trying to run bunker, and, we kind of saw how that played out on some maps, in regards to, the more sudden rise of Baptiste play. Obviously, Rascal has kind of, been kind of like the person at the forefront in regards to the Baptiste play. I'm trying to remember who was talking about, the map pool and them mentioning that Paris was going to be in the map pool.
I was actually just going to talk about that. I can't find the map pool for Stage 3 anywhere. It's not listed on the official site. It's not listed. You can't even click into the games on the schedule yet. So I don't think we know for certain 100% what the map pool is going into Stage 3. And that could have a big effect on the meta too. I've scoured the internet and Googled multiple things, and I don't see the map pool for Stage 3. So I am curious to see, what we end up with. If we do end up with Paris, if we do end up with, Anubis again, Horizon, we could see some more bunker comp come into play. And that will definitely affect what teams do where they end up. So I'm curious to see where the map pool ends up. I figured they would have announced something by now, but I guess not. I guess we're just going to go into it and surprise.
Hope for the best.
Yeah, exactly. We're only playing gun game on Paris. That's it. That's all we're doing.
Oh boy. Yeah, I was quickly just checking Wikipedia again just to see it's not there. So when they announce this, and it's probably going to be tomorrow because we podcast Monday nights. So when they announce it, I'll be sure to swear as soon as I see Paris in the map pool. That's just the way it has to be.
Oui.
But anyways, of course, we have to be kind of on Atlanta watch. They have a really tough week. If you're hoping that Atlanta's gonna have a turnaround week, you're barking up the wrong tree. Unfortunately, they have the Shock and the Titans in week 1. That is a yikes. That is almost so far off of the yikes meter that it's just gonna break at that point. I don't know. I don't care what form the King Baby Bay is gonna be in. That's gonna be a tall order, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean this will answer the question: Is Atlanta the God Killer? As to steal a comic book term, are they the team that for some reason cannot win against mere mortals, but for some reason can take down these juggernauts, these titans. I don't want to keep saying titans because it's not just the titans, like the Shock and the Titans. So I am curious to see how they do against these teams. Even going into this, taking 2 games off of NYXL, we've talked about in the past that NYXL has shown that they are among mortals in terms of goats. They are better than most other teams, but they are still down kind of on the same level. Whereas Shock and Titans, at least prior to stage 3, were kind of on their own plane type of thing. So I'm curious to see how it plays out, but I'm not expecting them to win. I'd be happy if they pushed either one of them to a map 5. That being said, stranger things have happened, so I won't count it out, I guess.
I was just waiting for you to say, that being said, 4 rows for both.
That being said, Atlanta 4-0s both teams. I'll go the other way. Atlanta just raffles. Dogman comes out, and he just asserts his dominance in bumper cries. That's not going to happen.
So you're saying he's going to come out on stage in T-pose?
T-pose, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. With the ultimate bowl cut.
Mm-hmm. See, that was only his first form. He hasn't even reached that final form. So just as a reminder, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to get the spectator client, just like we did for the Overwatch World Cup. And with that, the games are going to be on kind of like a 1-day delay to hit the viewer. But that is going to be a separate client. It will be on the Battle.net launcher. And they said that's going to be for Stage 3, so we'll see whether or not we get it this week, or if that's just going to be added at some point in Stage 3. So I know you and I are both looking forward to checking that out. Maybe we could do some video-related content with that. But I'm excited just to, go in and see how many times the brig bots of the Overwatch League just stand still or just straight out feed. Can't wait to see that. And of course, we can see Bumper just DPSing like he does and only he knows how to do. So I'm looking forward to it and seeing all of the great stuff that comes from that. But with that being said, Spider, I feel like it's time that we close out the show for tonight.
I agree. I think we've given you a good basis to make your own opinions on Stage 3, and if you don't want to make your own opinions, just go back and listen to the show again, and you have our opinions twice.
Perfect. So with that being said, if you guys want to help us out, one of the best things to do is to go leave us a review over on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Let me know not to type when I feel like mic mute is actually on, or when it's just broken, especially, which we found out earlier today. So thank you, Spider, for that. So now I know for sure I can just mute Discord. and that'll work fine. But I will note, when I did that, I noticed immediately your volume dipped a little bit in Discord when I hit mute on my end for some reason, and I don't know why it does that, but that's besides the point. But anyways, we're looking for, insight on how we can make for a better listening experience for you guys. If you want to find additional Overwatch-related content, be sure to check out Overwatch Recall. That is our podcast directory on our website, and then every Sunday night, we release the episodic listings of everything going on in the podcast scene for Overwatch. And of course, you can find more information at OW Recall. If you guys want to help us out, you can consider pledging to us over on Patreon. That will help grow our podcast network. And we have tiers starting at just $1 a month, with more information being found at patreon.com/OWL Network. So you too can join the likes of Blazing Bob, Brendan, and Gabby in helping our network grow. And also helping with this cause, we do have a new patron who goes by Owl. Imagine that.
Ooh.
Exactly. So,
Owl, joke of the night.
Yeah. Thank you so much for showing your support, and we appreciate you pledging to us on Patreon. And I did post kind of a general update in regards to all of our podcasts there last night. So if you are someone that pledges to our Patreon, go check that out. And a couple of other announcements before we shill all the contact information. We do have a game night coming up here in, 2 weeks, roughly. That is on June 15th. That is on a Saturday night. We'll kick things off at 7 p.m. Pacific time. So join us for a night of custom games, which of course is going to include some of the workshop modes as well. So we will, of course, be streaming this on our Twitch channel. So join us in Discord. It'll be a good time. You could shoot Bob and Ed, and you could trash talk Ed and tell him how his views on Houston are just garbage. All of that good stuff. But it should be a fun night, and I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, we have a good turnout. We'll see just how bad people are at gun game, along with some other workshop modes, which I'm excited to play. But outside of that, we do have an update in regards to this podcast in particular. And, I know the person was a little adamant about me, saying things on a podcast about it, but, it is with a heavy heart that I have to announce that Slambo is no longer going to be a part of this podcast, so my hashtag soulmate is no longer going to be on here outside of, our lovely sounder at the start of the show. So I do want to thank Matt for all of the hard work that he has put in as a host, not just on Overwatch League Network, but also kind of being the man behind our Power Rankings content, which I'll probably have to take over at this point. So it really goes without saying that, what Slambo and I have transcends beyond just, what we do on the show. So be sure to go show him some love and support over on Twitter at SlamBoverwatch. And I know, we'll probably bump into each other next time I'm out in Vegas, but I wish him nothing but the best.
Yeah, I mean, I was the third wheel that came into the show. This was the show that the house that you and Slambo built to coin the WWE phrase. But he was always a big, I don't want to get on this big long thing, but you and him were two of the key people that influenced me the most in podcasting, specifically in Overwatch podcasting. I had dabbled in it before, but listening to you on Heroes Never Die, listening to him on the Cavalry, you guys were the two that kind of encouraged me to be yeah, you get out there, get in the community, you can do this, get your feet back on the ground, and your enthusiasm and just your love for the game, and your love for the community was what made it a new home for me. And Slambo was obviously a big part of that. So he will absolutely 100% be missed. The show is taking a huge loss on this one. You and I do the best we can, but no one quite brings the level of energy that Matt Zorns does. So we will soldier on without him, but we are all the less missing him.
Yeah, so now when I shout into the abyss, even more so, everyone will understand why. But yes. With that being said, Spider, we have a number of different ways how our listeners can get a hold of us, whether it is, on email, social media, all of that good stuff. So why don't you go ahead and let them know how they can do that?
Sure thing. And, since we lost Slambo, reach out, talk to us, give us your favorite Slambo moment, or just, say thank you. I know we'll appreciate it. I know he absolutely will appreciate it. And so you can do that at email via contact@owlnshow.com. You can go check out our website if you just want to read some stuff or check out what's going on. It's www.owlnshow.com. You can send a message on Twitter or questions, or if there's a game night mode you want to try out, you can do that at @owlnshow. Check out our YouTube. We post all our shows on YouTube, and then various YouTube content there. Like Totem said, our power rankings will come back sooner rather than later. I'm sure we'll figure something out. That is youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. Hop on our Discord, come talk to us. We have chat going on all the time, people arguing, people agreeing how bad Houston is, feeding Ed's ego. You can do that on discord.me/OWLN show. If you're listening to the audio of the podcast, you can watch us live on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/OWLN show. We are a Twitch affiliate, so you can, it's just another way to support us. You can get a cool emoticon via Twitch and get notified whenever we go live. We have multiple shows going on every week. We have our Monday night show, which is what you're currently listening to. It is Overwatch League Network. That is 7 p.m. Pacific time. Then we have our fantasy-focused show, which is Owl by the Numbers, which is Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific. And I'm sure you guys are ramping back up as we get back into it and talking more goats since 222 is out. But like I said, that's 6 p.m. Pacific on Tuesdays. And then Wednesdays, we have our Variety Overwatch show, which is basically 2 hours of Totem trying not to get derailed by Edenor while they talk about various Overwatch things. That is Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. And then we have always streams sprinkled throughout, like you've streamed during the day, multiple different days. Like I typically stream on Thursday, like we did a stream last Thursday of Arcade. So, definitely hit the follow button so you know when the streams are going up. And then finally, I'll just chill it one more time. You can check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/Owl Network. I guess I'll throw my Twitter in here. You can yell at me at SpiderGD, but definitely reach out to the show at OWLN Show.
Mm-hmm. And as for myself, you can find me on Twitter at Totally_DrunkCTR. And if you need more intake of just listening to me on Overwatch podcasts, again, I was on the Omnic Weekly. That episode did hit iTunes and podcatchers earlier today, where you can hear me talking about future Overwatch content, potentially. Maybe like spin-off stuff like that. Like BlizzCard. Like, we need this to happen, and I know there is a game mode that I did find on the ELO workshop page that, you had sent my way. So I'm having fun with that, but go check that out. It was a really good time being on there and continuing that podcast conquest that I've been on all of these years, so just adding another name to that list. But with that being said, guys, I do want to thank you again to everyone who's been hanging out with us tonight for Overwatch League Network episode 82. I've been your host, Totally Drunk, joined as always by my co-host Spider, and we hope to see you guys back tomorrow night when we talk all things Fantasy Overwatch League for OWL by the Numbers. Take care and have a good night.